Hello everyone, my name is Liran Plitman from the Animal Welfare Department in the Israeli Veterinary Services, Ministry of Agriculture, and I'll be talking today about the public consultation we did on developing a national strategy for managing free-roaming cats and our challenges as the regulators when it comes to forming policy on this matter. So in 2020, we decided to do a public consultation on the problem of the overpopulation of free-roaming cats in Israel. Now, this impacts first and foremost the cats themselves, their welfare, but there are also public health issues to do with zoonoses and free feeding. There's an effect on wildlife and public sanitation, be it from cats eating from the trash or from leaving food out for them. The goals for the public consultation were to, first of all, hear from the public and the stakeholders, hear if they have any new ideas, possibly new insights that we haven't thought of, promote better cooperation between stakeholders, and also use it as an opportunity to inform the public about issues relating to free-roaming cats. The first thing we wanted to do was map the current situation in Israel regarding free-roaming cats. Now, if any of you have ever visited, you would surely remember that there is an overpopulation of free-roaming cats pretty much all over, estimated around 1 million cats in a country of 9 million citizens. Another thing you might have noticed is the phenomenon of communal feeding in Israel. Here you can see on the lower right a photo that was taken outside my house just yesterday. So this is a very common sight in Israel, just cats being fed on the street. Now, as of today, there is no formal national policy on free-roaming cat management. So municipalities can choose whether to do TNR, trap, neuter, return, regulate feeding, promote adoption, etc. The one thing that has been consistent for the last decade is government subsidies offered to municipalities for doing TNR programs in the sum of 4.5 million shekels each year, which is equivalent to around 1.1 million euros. So since it was introduced in 2011, this has helped neuter around 400,000 cats. So the next step was to identify all the relevant stakeholders for the public consultation. It quickly became clear that pretty much everyone is a stakeholder when it comes to free-roaming cats, from the ministries in charge of animal welfare, public health, environmental protection, to local government, municipal and army veterinarians, animal-related NGOs, academics who study the subject, businesses that deal with the presence of free-roaming cats on their property, to the general public, those who take an active part in feeding and caring for the cats, to those who encounter them in both positive and negative contexts. And of course, the cats themselves, which obviously cannot speak for themselves, and so we have to represent their interests as well. The consultation process lasted 2 years. It was very extensive. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the time to go into detail about every tool we used. Suffice it to say, we attempted to let every stakeholder express their opinion by using numerous different tools, both online and live face-to-face, with the highlight being a 4-hour-long roundtable discussion with over 100 stakeholder representatives. So early on in the process, we faced quite a few unexpected challenges. One of these was the matter of terminology. Some stakeholders, mostly animal rights activists and animal NGOs, didn't like the use of the word problem when describing the subject of free-roaming cats. They felt it associated a negative feeling with the cats, which would affect the way people treated them. They also didn't like the use of the term free-roaming cats to describe the cats, as they thought it was synonymous with vagrancy, which they believed had an illegal connotation. We were offered a bunch of different names for the cats. We actually started off with street cats, which is the most common term in Israel when referring to cats, but decided on eventually on free-roaming cats, as it is the most comprehensive of all terms. It includes both unowned and owned cats that are allowed to roam outside, friendly and feral cats, urban and rural living cats, etc. It's also used extensively in the research literature, and we at least believe it is the most neutral. When asking the public what are the key issues regarding the overpopulation of free-roaming cats, The four issues which we identified at the beginning emerged again and again. So the cat's welfare, public health, the negative effect on wildlife, and sanitation. Now, naturally, different stakeholders emphasize different issues, and a sort of a bell curve emerged. As on one side, there are those who view free-roaming cats as an asset, mostly the caretakers and animal organizations, and on the other side, those who viewed cats as a nuisance, an opinion emphasized mostly by representatives from local government, although they were conveying the sentiments of citizens, of the public who turned to them for help. And the rest of the stakeholders and majority of the public can be found in the middle of the curve. So what did we learn in this process? Let's start with data. Some things we already knew beforehand, but wanted to know what the updated research says. Other things we wanted to know in relation to Israel, etc. So, for example, obviously we know that free-roaming cats can suffer from poor welfare, but we wanted to know the extent. What is the average lifespan of a cat on the streets, which is, by the way, less than 5 years for adults? What are the common diseases they suffer from, causes of death, physical condition when they're brought in to a vet clinic? And thankfully, one of the most extensive studies on free-roaming cat populations was done in Israel by Dr. Idit Gunter for over 12 years, so we had a lot of data available. We talked about the presence of widespread feeding, but we wanted to know, once again, the extent of it. So I said before, Israel has 9 million citizens. And through a nationwide questionnaire, as well as a sample survey, we found that 1 out of 3 Israelis has recently fed a free-roaming cat. Now, these are irregular feeders, so they see a cat, they throw their lunch leftovers, not the so-called heavy feeders who buy sacks of food and feed colonies on a regular basis. But still, this is an astonishing number, and it's also supported in Gunter's research. As for the effect cats have on wildlife, we learned it's not a simple matter of predation alone. We know free-roaming cats are amazing predators, cats in general, and are considered at least partly responsible for the disappearance of a few endemic species of Israeli wildlife. But their impact doesn't stop there. According to interviews we conducted with ecologists and zoologists, wildlife are drawn to the free-roaming cat feeding spots, since food is often left there, which makes them susceptible to diseases carried by cats and other harms, such as getting run over by cars. And more than that, free-roaming cats have been known to hybridize with wild cats, which can lead to the extinction of the wild cat. So one of the most important things we wanted to know were the required TNR rates for population reduction, right? The million-dollar question, and its general efficacy. We now know that a very high rate, between 70 to 90%, is required. We know that there are compensation mechanisms which make it even harder to see a decrease, such as migration of unneutered cats, a higher ratio of kittens per litter, less competition, so better survival rates, and that no management strategy can rely on TNR alone. It has to be accompanied by other components such as adoption programs and extensive education. So we got caught up on recent scientific research, which was complicated but straightforward. But then as we neared the end of the public consultation, a few themes began to emerge which left us quite bewildered. The good news was there is a great deal of consensus among stakeholders. This may seem trivial, but there is a widespread agreement that overpopulation is the problem. There is also a strong consensus against culling as a means of reducing the population. In general, most people agree that feeding is a positive phenomenon. And there's a strong agreement on TNR as an important component of future strategies, along with education and better cooperation between local government and the community. This wasn't as trivial as you might think, because Israel has a large religious population, which we thought perhaps would object to TNR, both Jews and Muslims. So this sounds nice, right? However, this is where it gets a little more complicated. Once you get into it, there seem to be quite a few gaps, both in knowledge and perception. So, for example, we saw that there is a consensus across the board on the problem of overpopulation and wanting to take steps to mitigate it. But at the same time, there is a staunch objection to limit feeding in any way. So what we see is a disassociation between overpopulation and availability of food. Now we know that when there is an abundance of food, there will be a growth in population, there's better survivability, there's less competition, more pregnancies. So this is really a cognitive dissonance, if you will, that we need to somehow overcome. Another theme that came up during the consultation was the notion that TNR is the one and only solution and that it stands alone. When we now know that although it's an important component in future strategies, it has to be accompanied by other practices and that only very high rates are effective. And of course, those require an unrealistic budget. I remind you, 1 million cats, at least 10 times what we offer now in subsidies. And of course, this came with expectation, or rather the demand that the government will cover the total cost. Another interesting contradiction we encountered with some stakeholders was the concern regarding the cats' welfare on the streets, while at the same time trying to normalize their presence in public by using terms such as community cats and community assets, and once again overtly objecting to the term free-roaming cats. Yet another theme that came up during the consultation was the tension between science, logic, and emotion, with many stakeholders refusing to accept scientific fact that was presented to them. This was especially evident regarding the issue of cats' impact on wildlife, with many stakeholders refusing to accept that cats have any negative effect on wildlife or on the environment. And of course, others accuse them of having compassion for the cats alone and not for other species. So I tried to put the main themes into a word cloud here. A word cloud is made up of words or short sentences in which the size of each word or sentence indicates how prominent or common, frequent it was. So we can clearly see the contradiction here. Okay, so goal is to reduce population, next to do not limit feeding. Okay, both are said by the same stakeholders. We also see the different voices. Cats are good for the environment alongside cats harm wildlife. But the real question here is, do the bigger sentences, the bigger size sentences, those who were more prominent or frequent, do they represent the opinion of the majority? Or were they made by the more vocal yet smaller groups of stakeholders? This is another thing we have to consider as regulators who are meant to serve the public at large. So this is where the consultation ends and our challenge as regulators begins. How do we address in future policy the conflicting views on cats, as they have both a positive and negative presence in public? How do we resolve knowledge gaps relating to TNR efficiency, resource-based population growth, effects on wildlife, etc., when many cannot be convinced with scientific research-based facts? How do we overcome perception gaps or cognitive dissonances on matters such as the population growth when food is available? And of course, what is the opinion of the public, which is usually not heard, or at least not heard enough, but is an important stakeholder nonetheless. And then there are also the other challenges. The demand for total funding of TNR, of veterinary care, cat food, etc., which is, of course, unrealistic considering the limited budget and the numbers of cats we're talking about, not to mention the obvious challenges in doing a national TNR program, such as the shortage of veterinarians, the difficulty in capturing feral and trap-shy cats, migration, etc. Then there's also the need to regulate communal feeding, not only to reduce population, but also reduce nuisances caused by feeding in sensitive locations, such as hospitals and food factories, or in a way that creates a sanitation problem. So this will require full cooperation from all stakeholders, especially the cat caretakers and local government. And we wish to find ways to incentivize responsible feeding practices rather than rely on harsh regulations. And finally, we need to overcome years of suspicion, mainly from on the side of cat caretakers and animal activists who believe that we wish to harm the cats and not find a beneficial solution. Well, I don't have answers for you today to all those questions and challenges, but I can tell you what the next step is. We will soon begin a pilot study in 2 municipalities in Israel, one urban, one rural, where we will attempt to implement a holistic approach to managing free-roaming cat populations. So this will include evaluation of population size and constant monitoring, high-volume TNR, regulated communal feeding with incentives for cat caretakers, subsidized veterinary care for free-roaming cats, including a cat park or garden where free-roaming cats can be rehabilitated or relocated. We want to promote adoption, public education on cat welfare, responsible feeding, impact on wildlife, etc. We want to have a direct communication channel between the municipal veterinary service and the caretakers, better waste management, and more. So we will be borrowing from nudge theory in order to encourage behavioral changes in the community in a positive way. So be it with incentives for feeding responsibly, leaflets and educational materials, public forums, continuous communication to better the cooperation between cat caretakers, vets, and the community. Hopefully this will prove a success and allow us to formulate a national management strategy eventually for the sake of finding an optimal balance between humans, free-roaming cats, and the environment. So I leave you with this photo of my own 2 formerly free-roaming cats, and thanks for listening.